Hello, my name is Ricardo Gomez Nieto, and this is my 474 class project. You can see by the title, Sequential Occupation of the Historical Society of Grand Forks. It's a little bit of a different project. It's not a quantitative analysis, it's more of a qualitative analysis on a particular piece of property, which is going to allow me to eventually build this off into my thesis surrounding the Myra Museum and the Grand Forks Historical Society, but placing that into a larger context that I can eventually use as a springboard to study small rural communities and change across the North Dakota landscape. Excuse me. So, what does that topic entail? For this project specifically, I'm going to take apart the idea of sequential occupants. This is an idea that was put forth in the early 1930s, late 1940s by a Harvard geography professor known as David Whitsley. Whitsley was the last geography professor at Harvard before the department was shelved due to a combination of political and economic factors, but primarily political. Eventually, though, his theory of sequential occupancy, which dealt more with understanding how space is related to place, was picked up by a different gentleman. His name was Yifu Tuan, and he dealt more with the human idea of what space and place is. So, what the motivating factor for this project is taking these two ideas and placing them together in a harmonious union. Uh, so in essence, what I'm going to be approaching here is how do I take new technology and new information, because both of these writers existed at the beginning and tail end of the 20th century. We are now in 2020, at least 20 years into the 21st century, and technology has significantly evolved. Yes, there was aerial photography back in the 1940s and 50s, but now we have high quality satellite images. So how can I take these newer technologies and try to apply these to their practical concepts on a micro scale before applying them to study rural communities across North Dakota? Because I feel like this would be a good test subject before rolling out the main product. And thankfully for me, the Grand Forks Historical Society has allowed me to use their property and given me access to data related to their property lines. So then I can correspond that information to the GSI photos, which I have collected. I've set them up into two sections, what I call my photo maps, which is just an overlay of my initial planning layer over the photo, and then a full map, which is more congruent with a printable map. So I would indicate where the buildings are, what the names are. It's a more accurate and holistic approach towards mapping rather than just a simple, lines on map. So starting with these basic maps, we have the 1962 map. This was before the Grand Forks Historical Society was created. When I took this snapshot, I forgot to take off the hybrid layer underneath, so there are modern roads over it, but you can see clearly in the center this big green area that is the Campbell House. That's the original house on the property. That will remain consistent throughout the project. That building will never move. Well, it will move, but it will never leave the property. You can see to the north a place called Lynch Court. That was a bunch of rental homes. It's not a permanent fixture. Eventually, that is going to go away. The homes in this area, between the 1982 map that I just brought up, the 1962 map, you can see there is significant development, especially in terms of construction and expansion. Additionally, places like Lynch Court here are gone. This is replaced by an upscale fraternal order called the Elks Club. They would not exist there for long, but I strongly suspect that based on when the Myra Museum was created, which is this building down here, you can still see the Campbell House. You can see the other buildings there. When this was created in the 1960s, well, really at the tail end of the 60s, beginning in the 1970s, that it was motivated by this movement of what's considered a high-class fraternal organization and them building their property here next to the golf course, which can be if I had zoomed out on this photo north of the property. This is our first satellite photo. This is from 1991, and you can see here the property has continued to expand, especially between these two. There's a significant northern push. This is created in the late 1980s for the centennial celebration of the county. Well, not the county, the state. And there's also the addition of the carriage house. These will all be labeled later, but just to get an idea of what's going on, the museum is clearly doing well. The surrounding homes are doing well. However, we can see that the fraternal order known as the Elks Club has no one parked there. Now, at this point, I am not aware if they had shut down, but by the 1997 map here, which was taken 3 months after the flood of 1997, you can see that the property has significantly shrunk. There was a ton of changes done to the initial property, and that's because the Elks Club had by that time shut down. The property had been sold off to a developer, and townhomes were built there. The Meyer Museum had not expanded at this time, but there is significant growth within the parking lot and within other structures. You can even see in the aerial photos a path leading down to the water. By 2005, museum had completely reoriented based on the needs of an incoming flood wall, and you can see here its general layout. The 2005 led to 2015 with the addition of more buildings. And now we have the 2025 map. You can see all of its current buildings and its current spatial location. You can also see better here how most of these homes have retained since the 2005 and since the 2015 images, not shown in order here, but since these two images were taken, all of the homes here have maintained their value. They don't look run down, they don't look like they're falling apart, and clearly people are putting effort into maintaining these homes. Looking at what I call the full maps, we can see a concentrated breakdown of each individual map showing outhouse, property lines. These emphasize the changes going on at the museum. These are emphasizing what is going on in regards to changes to the overall location, changes to their greater positioning. As a side note, this outhouse is visible in some of the photos, but not all of them. But the outhouse has consistently been located at the Meyer Museum since previously to its inception. After the 2005 reorientation, there is going to be significant changes to the overall layout. So if you were trying to simplify this, you could simplify it into pre-flood and post-flood. So pre-2005, post-2005. I've done my best to indicate where all of the property lines are and where all of the buildings are. And it was a little difficult in trying to get the lines between, say, the Campbell House to line up with the Campbell House on the photo map. But I feel like this is going to give the best general impression for someone who is looking at this to say, okay, this big blob here is related to this actual building. This then builds on a sequence of occupants for the location and builds in a sort of timeline that we can say, okay, from 1960, about 50 years ago to today, these are the general stages of development, and these are the general check marks that we can do. Rather than basing them on a cultural or a metaphorical example, we can base this on hard calculating facts to say, at this point in time, this building was here. It had significant value because it would eventually turn into the Meyer Museum Campbell House. And you can see how the building itself, Campbell House, was only moved once in 2005 from its original position to its current location, slightly up and to the right. This will then lead credence to Yi Fu Tuan's idea of giving power to space and place, and thus trying to preserve these ideas by asserting them into a sequential occupancy. These are my bibliographical sources. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to work on my thesis and forming the foundation. Have a nice day.